There is a star that lights the road. I'll take this ride and just drive. I wanna be the only one to make it to the light. I'll take it to the edge of ride. And maybe I could be the one riding to the setting sun tonight. And just drive.
In 1981, tales began to grow and grow about this Brazilian kid who was dominating the Formula Ford season. People covering that series were sort of starting to say this kid really is something special.
And Senna challenging for that second place, and he's taken it. A magnificent bit of driving by Senna, who's now in second place.
There was something otherworldly about him, not just in his driving, but in his voice, in his manner, in his whole being. He was a remarkably relentless character, probably more so than any other racing driver I've ever come across. This certainly made him the driver he was to a great degree, and I think it was maybe his greatest strength, but in one way, also perhaps a weakness.
It will have pleased him more than anything else, I think, that he's beaten his arch-rival Alain Prost.
The Senna-Prost rivalry was like no other I've ever known. There were suggestions of a feud between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher. Nothing comes close to how Senna and Prost were. The problem with them was not that they were so different, but in fact they were so alike, fundamentally. They were very different in the way they went about their racing. You watch Prost in a Formula One car and you would believe you could do it yourself. You watch Senna in the same car and you absolutely knew, you couldn't. I can remember in his first year when he was with Toleman, he had a long-term contract, and of course, Ayrton being Ayrton, blithely ignored that and signed for Lotus. Toleman were understandably a bit miffed about this. So they stood him down for the Italian Grand Prix. They punished him. So Ayrton wasn't driving at Monza, but he did come to the race anyway and spent the weekend with the team. And I wrote a column about it at the time, essentially saying I thought Toleman were completely in the right. I knew from the beginning that he wasn't happy. He said at one point, I read your column, I saw what you said, and then he said, I thought you were a friend. I said, what are you saying? I should never write anything critical of you. What the hell kind of a journalist would I be? In fairness, he did eventually. He said, yeah, okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Prost had been in Formula One for quite a while before Ayrton even arrived, and I always got on very well with him. And Senna said, you seem to be very close to Alain. And I said, yes, I get on very well with him. I always have done, And he said, well, that's a problem. That's a problem for me. I mentioned it later in the afternoon to Prost. And Prost just said, I always say to people, please, by all means, support Ayrton, support Senna, be a Senna fan, but don't hate me. Senna's relationship with the FIA was pretty catatonic. Senna had a particular problem with Jean-Marie Balestre, who was then the president, and French, like Prost. Senna was convinced, and there's some evidence that he was not wrong on occasion, that Balestre took actions that favoured Prost. He became a complete war of words.
I had a bad time with Balázs. I did the right thing when we crashed at the first chicane, when Prost turned the car over me and he pushed me out. And I won the race, and they took that race away from me. And that was not justice. What took place over that winter was really.
When Senna first arrived, he was quiet, relatively mild-mannered, quite gentle. And I think over time, he definitely sort of pulled a sort of protective shell around himself, and he became much more withdrawn. The making of Senna was when, after Prost had left McLaren and gone to Ferrari, Gerhard Berger came to McLaren. Essentially, Gerhard wants to have fun. That's what life was all about. And he really did have quite an effect on Senna. They became close friends. Berger always said, Ayrton taught me about how to drive, you know, and I taught him how to live. Press conference at Suzuka in '91 was, to begin with, a celebration of Senna's latest World Championship. But it became more of a look back to the race the previous year. Senna was on pole position and Prost was qualified second. Pole position at Suzuka had always been on the right. Problem was, it was on the dirty side of the circuit. Senna had won the year before, starting from the dirty side of the circuit, but he was unhappy about it and he wanted it changed. And the request was refused, and Senna always held Balázs responsible for that decision. And he figured the fact that Balázs wouldn't allow it to be changed, that was favouring Prost.
Balázs gave an order, and they said, no, we don't change the pole position. And it was an order from Balázs because I know from inside the system. If Sunday, at the start, because I'm in the wrong place, Prost jumped the start, and he gets beating me off the line, and the first corner I'm going for it. And he better not turning ahead of me because he's not gonna make it. And it just happened like this. I really wish it didn't happen. It was not good for me, it was not good for Formula One. I won the championship. And so what?
The problem with Senna is there were so many days, so many memorable days. I mean, for instance, you know, everybody remembers the one and only Grand Prix at Donington in '93 in torrential rain.
Prost gets away well, so does Hill, so does Schumacher, and Wendlinger is coming up well. Senna is crowded out.
I think he was 6th at the first corner and in the lead by the end of the lap. And he just picked everybody off.
Ayrton Senna is up to 4th position ahead of Schumacher and challenging Wendlinger as they go round the right-hander into the old hairpin. Senna is up to 3rd.
That was one of those laps you can't really quite believe you've witnessed.
I've done it, he says. Out comes the fist of victory, and Senna has got another 10 World Championship points.
Another moment, you know, that I think sticks in everyone's mind was at Silverstone when Senna retired.
And Nigel Mansell stops to take his rival Ayrton Senna back to the pits.
On the slowing down lap, Mansell stopped and picked him up and gave him a ride back. The next race was, I think, was Hockenheim. Ayrton was talking about the lift back, you know, that he'd had and all the rest of it, and said that as soon as he got to the McLaren pit, the first thing he did was tell the engineers everything he'd read from Mansell's dash. When we were at Imola in 1994, you know, 12 years had gone by since there had been a fatality at a Grand Prix. On the Saturday, Roland Ratzenberger crashed in qualifying, and he was killed. Senna was terribly, terribly upset. Professor Watkins had a long conversations with Ayrton after Ratzenberger's accident, and he did say to him at one point, Ayrton, I don't think you should race tomorrow, and I think you should think very hard about racing again, ever. That was when Senna said to him, Professor, there are some things we can't change. The race started, and there was an enormous accident at the start. Finally, the race was restarted with Senna ahead, Schumacher second, and of course at the start of the next lap at Tamburello, that was where the accident happened. The shock after that weekend was very profound. Having had no fatalities at a Grand Prix for 12 years, suddenly to have two in 2 days, and one of them being, you know, the racing driver on earth, it was shattering. He was without doubt, I think, the most complex man I ever met in racing. And I also think that probably those who seek to deify him are selling him short, because he was so much more interesting than, you know, a mere deity.